What would you do if the man you thought was weakest in your life suddenly stood up in front of everyone and made you the villain of your own story? I'm Lysandra Vale, 34 years old, and I work as an insurance claims analyst. I've always been good at reading people, understanding their motivations, knowing exactly what buttons to push to get what I want. It's served me well in my career, and, honestly, in my marriage too. My husband Deacon has always been the quiet type, a high school English teacher who prefers books to people, routine to adventure. After 12 years together, I thought I had him completely figured out. The wedding was supposed to be a celebration. My college friend Rebecca was finally tying the knot with her longtime boyfriend, and the whole gang was invited. The venue was gorgeous, a restored barn with fairy lights and mason jar centerpieces, very Pinterest-worthy. Deacon looked handsome enough in his navy suit, though he kept tugging at his tie like it was strangling him. "You look beautiful tonight," he said, as we found our assigned table. I was wearing a burgundy wrap dress that hugged my curves in all the right places. I'd spent an hour on my makeup and hair, and I knew I looked good. "Thanks," I replied absently, scanning the room. That's when I saw him. Owen Llewellyn stood near the bar, looking exactly like the fantasy I'd been nursing for months. Tall, broad-shouldered, with that easy confidence that comes from knowing you're attractive. He was my trainer at the gym, had been for about 6 months now, and somewhere along the way, our professional relationship had become something much more interesting. "Oh my God, Owen's here," I said before I could stop myself. Deacon followed my gaze. "Your trainer? Why would he be here?" "Rebecca goes to the same gym, they're friends." I tried to sound casual, but my heart was already racing. Owen caught my eye across the room and flashed that devastating smile that made my knees weak every single time. As we settled at our table, I realized the seating arrangement was all wrong. Deacon was on my right, and there was an empty chair on my left where Rebecca's cousin was supposed to sit. But she'd apparently brought a last-minute date, so they'd moved to a different table. The empty chair taunted me. "Honey, would you mind switching seats?" I asked Deacon, already half standing. "What? Why?" "I want to sit closer to the dance floor. You know how much I love to dance." It wasn't entirely a lie. I did love to dance, especially when Owen was watching. Deacon looked confused but started to gather his jacket. "I guess, if you really want to." That's when Owen appeared at our table, devastatingly handsome in a charcoal grey suit that probably cost more than Deacon made in a week. "Lysandra, you look absolutely stunning." He leaned down and kissed my cheek, his cologne making my head spin. "And Deacon, right? Good to see you again." Deacon nodded politely, but I could see the tension in his jaw. "Owen." "Actually, Owen, there's an empty seat right here," I said, patting the chair Deacon was about to vacate. "Why don't you join our table?" The words hung in the air like a challenge. I saw Deacon's face change, saw the hurt flash across his features before he could hide it. But I was already committed to this path, already imagining how perfect the evening could be with Owen beside me. "I don't want to intrude," Owen said, though his eyes were already claiming the seat. "You're not intruding at all. Deacon was just moving anyway. Weren't you, honey?" The entire table had gone quiet. Gina, Deacon's mother, was staring at me with barely concealed disapproval. Tristan, Deacon's younger brother, looked like he wanted to disappear under the tablecloth. Even my own mother, Vivian, seemed uncertain. "Lysandra," Deacon said quietly, "I think we should talk about this." "Oh, don't be such a stick in the mud," I laughed, waving him off. "It's a wedding. We're supposed to have fun." But Deacon didn't move to the other chair. Instead, he stood up fully, his napkin falling to the floor. The silence at our table spread outward like ripples in a pond until half the reception was watching us. "No," he said, and his voice carried further than I'd ever heard it. "I don't think I will." My stomach dropped. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. Deacon was supposed to be accommodating, maybe a little grumpy, but ultimately compliant. He always was. Deacon, you're making a scene, I hissed, acutely aware of all the eyes on us. I'm making a scene. His laugh was bitter, unfamiliar. You just publicly moved your husband out of his seat so another man could sit next to you at a wedding, and I'm the one making a scene. Someone at a nearby table had their phone out, clearly recording. My face burned with embarrassment but also anger. How dare he humiliate me like this? It's just a seat, Deacon. Don't be so dramatic. Is it? He looked around the table, making eye contact with each person. Is it just a seat, or is it something more? Owen shifted uncomfortably. Look, man, I don't want to cause any problems. Then maybe you should find somewhere else to sit, Deacon said calmly. The silence stretched until I couldn't stand it anymore. Fine. Fine, Owen, maybe this isn't the best idea after all. But the damage was done. Owen melted away into the crowd, and Deacon still didn't sit down. Instead, he picked up his jacket and looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize. I'll be at the bar, he said. Enjoy the rest of the reception. As he walked away, I tried to laugh it off. Men, right? So sensitive about everything. But nobody laughed with me. Gina was shaking her head, Tristan was staring at his plate, and even my mother looked uncomfortable. The couple at the next table was still filming, and I could already imagine the video making its rounds on social media. What had I just set in motion? The car ride home was excruciating. Deacon drove in complete silence while I stared out the window, my mind racing with justifications for what had happened. By the time we pulled into our driveway, I'd convinced myself that I was the wronged party. You completely overreacted back there, I said as we walked into our house. Deacon hung up his keys without looking at me. Did I? Yes. It was just a seating arrangement. You acted like I was asking you to give up your firstborn. Our daughter is asleep upstairs, he said quietly. Let's not wake her with this. Nora, our 9-year-old daughter, who thought her parents had the perfect marriage because we'd always been good at hiding our problems from her. The thought of her seeing us fight made my chest tight, but I pushed the feeling away. There's nothing to fight about, I said. You're the one who made it weird. Deacon finally looked at me, and something in his expression made me take a step back. Lysandra, I need you to be honest with me. Is something going on between you and Owen? The question hit me like a slap. Not because it was unfair, but because it was so accurate. For months, Owen and I had been dancing around something that felt inevitable. Lingering touches during training sessions, text messages that had nothing to do with fitness, the way he looked at me like I was the most fascinating woman he'd ever met. That's ridiculous, I said, but my voice came out too high, too defensive. Is it? Yes. He's my trainer. We have a professional relationship. Professional relationships don't usually involve moving your spouse so you can sit next to your trainer at weddings. I felt cornered, which always made me lash out. Maybe if you paid half as much attention to me as Owen does, I wouldn't need to seek out adult conversation elsewhere. The words hung between us like a weapon. Deacon's face went very still. I see, he said finally. So this is my fault. I didn't say that. You just did. He started walking toward the stairs. I'm going to bed. We can talk about this tomorrow when we're both calmer. But I wasn't ready to let it go. Don't you dare walk away from me, Deacon. I'm trying to explain. You're trying to justify. He paused on the bottom step. There's a difference. After he disappeared upstairs, I poured myself a large glass of wine and sat in our living room, surrounded by the life we'd built together. Family photos smiled down at me from the mantelpiece, but all I could think about was the way Owen had looked at me tonight, the way he made me feel alive in a way I'd forgotten was possible. My phone buzzed. A text from Owen. Sorry about tonight. Your husband seems like a good guy. Maybe we should keep things professional from now on. The message should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like a door slamming shut on the most exciting thing in my life. Before I could second-guess myself, I typed back, "Don't let tonight scare you off." Deacon is just insecure. He'll get over it. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then appeared again. If you're sure, I'd hate to lose what we have. My heart raced as I typed, "You won't, I promise." Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into maintaining the illusion that everything was normal, while secretly nurturing my relationship with Owen. It required careful planning and creative storytelling, but I'd always been good at both. "I'll be working late tonight," I told Deacon on a Tuesday evening, already dressed for the gym. Big case coming up for review. "Again?" He looked up from grading papers at the kitchen table. "That's the 3rd time this week." "Insurance fraud doesn't keep bankers' hours," I said, kissing the top of his head in what I hoped looked like casual affection. "Don't wait up." But instead of going to the office, I drove to the gym where Owen was waiting with a private training session that had nothing to do with fitness. We talked for hours about everything and nothing, and he listened to me in a way that made me feel like the most important person in the world. "Your husband doesn't appreciate what he has," Owen said as we sat in his car in the parking lot afterward. "If you were mine, I'd never take you for granted." The words sent electricity through my entire body. "Owen, I know it's complicated, but life's too short to settle for boring, don't you think?" When I got home that night, Deacon was still awake, reading in bed. "How was work?" he asked without looking up from his book. "Fine, boring. You know how it is." The lies came so easily now, but as the weeks passed, I noticed Deacon watching me more carefully. He asked more questions about my schedule, paid closer attention to my explanations. One evening, I caught him looking through our bank statements with a frown. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just balancing the checkbook. There are some charges I don't recognize." My blood went cold. The dinners with Owen, the new workout clothes I'd bought to impress him, the hotel coffee shop where we'd started meeting after our gym sessions. "Like what?" "The bistro. We've never been there, but there are several charges over the past month." The bistro was Owen's favorite cafe, a trendy little place near the gym where we'd been having what I told myself were innocent coffee dates. But looking at Deacon's face, I realized how it must look on paper. "Oh, that. Janet and I have been meeting there for lunch sometimes. You know how she is about trying new places." Deacon nodded slowly, but something in his eyes told me he wasn't entirely convinced. "Janet from work?" "Yes. You can ask her if you want." The challenge in my voice surprised even me. "I don't need to ask her, Lysandra. I trust you." The word trust hit me like a physical blow, but instead of guilt, I felt irritation. If Deacon paid more attention to me, if he made me feel desired and interesting the way Owen did, I wouldn't need to seek excitement elsewhere. That night, as Deacon slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and told myself I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just exploring a friendship with someone who appreciated me. It wasn't my fault that Deacon had become so predictable, so safe, so utterly boring, that the thought of spending the rest of my life with only him made me feel like I was suffocating. My phone lit up with a text from Owen. "Sweet dreams. Beautiful. Can't wait to see you tomorrow." I quickly deleted the message and turned the phone face down, but not before I'd smiled in the darkness. What Deacon didn't know wouldn't hurt him. The group dinner at the bistro was supposed to be casual, just a few people from the gym celebrating Sarah's promotion. But when Owen suggested I bring Deacon along, I knew it was a test of some kind. Could I handle having both men in the same space? Could I maintain the careful balance I'd been building? "You sure you want to come?" I asked Deacon as we got ready. "It's just gym people. You'll probably be bored." "I'd like to meet your friends," he said, adjusting his tie in the mirror. "You spend so much time with them lately." There was something in his tone that made me look at him more carefully, but his expression was neutral, unreadable. The restaurant was packed when we arrived, the usual trendy crowd sipping craft cocktails and taking photos of their food. Owen had secured a large table in the back, and he stood to greet us with that megawatt smile that never failed to make my pulse quicken. "Deacon, Great to finally see you again. Owen's handshake was firm, confident. Glad you could join us. Thanks for including me, Deacon replied politely. As we settled around the table, I found myself strategically positioned between Owen and Sarah, with Deacon across from me next to Janet. The seating felt natural enough, but I caught Owen's amused glance and realized he'd orchestrated it deliberately. So Deacon, said Jake, another trainer, Lysandra tells us you're a teacher. That must be rewarding. The pause before rewarding was loaded with condescension, and I saw Deacon notice it. It has its moments, Deacon said mildly. I could never do it, Sarah chimed in. Dealing with teenagers all day, the low pay. I'd go crazy with boredom. I felt a flicker of irritation on Deacon's behalf, but Owen leaned closer to me and whispered, You smell incredible tonight, and my attention scattered. What do you teach? Asked Janet, who was clearly enjoying the social dynamics playing out. English literature, mostly classic novels and poetry. Poetry, Owen laughed, and the sound was warm but somehow mocking. That's so quaint. Do kids even care about that stuff anymore? Some do, Deacon said. It's about finding ways to make it relevant to their lives. I bet you're good at that, I said quickly, trying to inject some support into my voice. But even as I said it, I was acutely aware of Owen's thigh pressed against mine under the table. The conversation flowed around topics I usually loved: fitness trends, weekend plans, gossip about other gym members. But with Deacon there, everything felt different. He didn't contribute much, just observed with those quiet eyes that missed nothing. Lysandra's been making incredible progress lately, Owen announced during a lull. Her dedication is really inspiring. Oh, please, I laughed, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. You're just a good motivator. I do my best to keep my clients satisfied. The double meaning hung in the air like smoke. Sarah giggled, Jake smirked, and I felt a thrill of excitement mixed with danger. This was the kind of flirting I craved, the kind of attention that made me feel alive. Deacon's expression didn't change, but I saw his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Speaking of satisfaction, Jake said with a grin, Owen was just telling us about his philosophy on marriage. What was it you said? About keeping the spark alive? Owen shrugged, his eyes dancing with mischief. I just think too many people settle into routines and forget to really see each other anymore. Marriage doesn't have to mean death of passion, you know? Absolutely, Sarah agreed. My ex-husband thought romance was remembering to put the toilet seat down. Everyone laughed except Deacon, who was studying his water glass like it contained the secrets of the universe. What do you think, Deacon? Owen asked with apparent innocence. How do you keep things exciting after 12 years? It was a loaded question, and everyone at the table knew it. Deacon looked up, and for a moment I thought he might actually answer. Instead, he smiled that polite teacher smile he used with difficult parents. I think real intimacy comes from truly knowing someone, he said quietly. Understanding their needs, their fears, their dreams. The excitement comes from growing together, not from novelty. How romantic, Jake said, but his tone suggested he found it anything but. Some people need more than just understanding, Sarah said, shooting a meaningful look at Owen. They need to feel desired, appreciated, like they're still worth pursuing. Exactly, I heard myself saying. It's important to feel seen. The word came out loaded with meaning I hadn't intended to reveal. Owen's hand brushed mine on the table, and I didn't pull away. Deacon excused himself to use the restroom, and the moment he was gone, the table's energy shifted. Your husband seems nice, Sarah said carefully. He is, I replied. Maybe too nice sometimes. What do you mean? Owen asked, though his knowing smile suggested he already understood. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm married to a library book, comfortable, familiar, but not exactly thrilling. The group laughed and I felt a rush of validation. These people understood me in a way Deacon never seemed to. Life's too short for boring, Owen said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "You deserve to feel excited about your life." When Deacon returned, I noticed he'd been gone longer than necessary. His face was composed, but there was something different in his posture, like he'd made some kind of decision. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Fine," he said, but he didn't quite meet my eyes. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of wine and laughter, an increasingly bold flirtation between Owen and me. By the time we said our goodbyes, I was giddy with attention and possibility. "We should do this again soon," Owen said, hugging me goodbye a little too long, a little too close. In the car, Deacon was quiet again. "That was fun," I said, trying to gauge his mood. "My friends really liked you." "Did they?" "Of course, you were charming." Deacon pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine, but he didn't get out immediately. "Lysandra, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." My heart started racing. "Okay. Are you having an affair?" The question hung between us like a live wire. I could have told the truth in that moment, could have explained about the emotional connection with Owen, the way he made me feel, the confusion and excitement and guilt all tangled up together. Instead, I did what I always did when cornered. "How can you even ask me that?" I said, letting hurt and indignation color my voice. "After 12 years of marriage, you think I'm capable of cheating on you. I think you're capable of justifying almost anything if it makes you feel good about yourself." The words hit like a slap. "That's a horrible thing to say. Is it untrue?" I stared at him, this man I'd married, this father of my child, and realized I didn't recognize the person looking back at me. Where was the accommodating, predictable Deacon I'd always known? "I can't believe you're accusing me of this," I said, getting out of the car. "Based on what? Because I have friends you don't understand? Because I laughed at dinner?" "Because you're different," he said, following me to the front door. "Because you light up around him in a way you never do around me anymore. Because you moved me out of my seat at a wedding so he could sit next to you. We're back to that again. We never left it, Lysandra. That was just the first time you stopped pretending to hide it." Inside the house, we stood in our entryway surrounded by the artifacts of our shared life. Nora's backpack by the door, family photos on the walls, the coat rack where we'd hung our jackets together for over a decade. "I'm not having an affair," I said, and technically it was true. Owen and I hadn't crossed that line yet. Deacon studied my face for a long moment. "Okay," he said finally. "I believe you." But as he headed upstairs, I had the unsettling feeling that he didn't believe me at all. And worse, that he was planning to do something about it. What was he planning? The next few weeks felt like living in a house made of glass, where every move was scrutinized and every word carried weight. Deacon had returned to his usual routine, grading papers, preparing lessons, reading before bed. But there was a watchfulness about him that made me nervous. I threw myself deeper into my relationship with Owen, telling myself that if Deacon was going to be suspicious anyway, I might as well give him something to be suspicious about. Our coffee dates became longer, our text conversations more frequent and intimate, our training sessions charged with an electricity that had nothing to do with exercise. "You're glowing," Janet observed one afternoon at work. "New skincare routine?" "Something like that," I said, unable to hide my smile. But maintaining the double life was exhausting. I had to remember which stories I'd told to whom, had to carefully manage my schedule to avoid conflicts, had to constantly monitor my phone to make sure Deacon never saw the wrong message at the wrong time. The close calls were becoming more frequent. "Who's texting you so much lately?" Deacon asked one evening, as my phone buzzed for the third time during dinner. "Work stuff," I said quickly, turning the phone face down. "You know how crazy things get during quarter end." "It's not quarter end," Nora piped up from across the table. "We just learned about quarters in math class. There are 4 of them and—" "Different kind of quarters, sweetie," I interrupted, shooting her a warning look. Deacon's eyes never left my face. "What kind of work emergency happens at 8 p.m.? "The kind that pays for this house," I snapped, immediately regretting the harshness in my voice when I saw Nora flinch. Later, after Nora was in bed, Deacon approached me in the kitchen, where I was loading the dishwasher with more force than necessary. "I called your office today," he said quietly, my hand stilled on the plates. "What?" "I wanted to surprise you with lunch, but they said you'd been leaving early most days this week. Something about flexible hours for a big case." "Think fast, Lysandra. It's a complicated fraud investigation. I've been doing a lot of field work, interviewing witnesses. I told you about it." "No," Deacon said, "you didn't." "I'm sure I mentioned, you didn't." His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "Just like you didn't mention that your gym charges showed up on our credit card statement. A lot of them. Personal training sessions that aren't on your usual schedule." My mouth went dry. "I've been working out more. Stress relief." "At 11 a.m. on Tuesday, when you were supposed to be at work." The walls were closing in. I could feel the careful structure I'd built beginning to crumble, and panic made me defensive. "Are you tracking my movements now?" I demanded, checking up on me like I'm some kind of criminal. "I'm trying to understand why my wife is lying to me." "I'm not lying." "Then explain the charges. Explain the schedule discrepancies. Explain why you're getting text messages at all hours from numbers I don't recognize." He knew. Somehow, Deacon knew everything, and the knowledge was written all over his face. But instead of confessing, instead of trying to salvage what was left of our marriage, I doubled down. "You want to know what's really going on?" I said, my voice rising. "I'm suffocating in this marriage. I feel like I'm disappearing a little more every day, and the only time I feel like myself anymore is when I'm not here, in this house, pretending that this life is enough for me." Deacon absorbed the blow without flinching. "So you're having an affair?" "I'm having a life." The words exploded out of me. "I'm having conversations with people who think I'm interesting, who want to know what I think about things, who don't just see me as the person who does their laundry and manages their schedule." "Is that what you think I see you as?" "Isn't it?" I was crying now, but they were angry tears, not sad ones. "When's the last time you looked at me, really looked at me, like I was someone worth pursuing? When's the last time you made me feel beautiful, or smart, or like you couldn't wait to be alone with me?" Deacon was quiet for so long, I thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I look at you like that every day, Lysandra. I have for 12 years. The problem is you stopped looking back." The truth of it hit me like a physical blow, but I was too far down this path to turn around now. "That's not fair," I said weakly. "No," Deacon agreed. "It's not." He left the kitchen, and I heard his footsteps on the stairs, heard our bedroom door close, with a soft click that somehow sounded more final than if he'd slammed it. I stood alone in our kitchen, surrounded by the detritus of our family dinner, and felt something crack open inside my chest. But instead of examining the feeling, instead of following Deacon upstairs and trying to fix what I'd broken, I picked up my phone and texted Owen. "Can you talk? I need to hear a friendly voice." He called within minutes. "Hey, beautiful, what's wrong?" "Deacon and I had a fight, a bad one." "I'm sorry. You want to talk about it?" "He thinks something's going on between us." There was a pause. "Is he right?" The question hung in the air, loaded with possibility and danger, and the promise of a life that felt bigger than the one I was living. "I don't know," I whispered. "Maybe. Maybe we should find out." 3 days later, I met Owen at a hotel bar downtown. I told myself I was just going for drinks, just going to talk, just going to explore this connection that had become the brightest thing in my increasingly complicated life. But when Owen suggested we get a room, when he looked at me like I was the most desirable woman he'd ever seen, when he promised me that I deserved to feel wanted and appreciated and alive, I said yes. Afterward, lying in sheets that smelled like expensive hotel detergent, I felt a mixture of exhilaration and terror that made it hard to breathe. "You okay?" Owen asked, tracing patterns on my bare shoulder. I think I just blew up my entire life. Or maybe you just started living it. When I got home that night, Deacon was waiting in the living room with a cup of tea and a stack of papers spread across the coffee table. "How was your evening?" he asked without looking up. "Fine. Just had drinks with the girls." The lie came automatically now. "Which girls?" "Sarah and Janet. You don't know them well." "No," Deacon agreed. "I don't." He gathered the papers into a neat stack, and I caught a glimpse of bank statements, phone records, what looked like printed emails. "What's all that?" "Research," he said simply, "for a project I'm working on." Something in his tone made my blood run cold, but when I looked at his face, his expression was perfectly calm. "What kind of project?" Deacon stood up, papers in hand, and looked at me with eyes that seemed to see straight through to my soul. "The kind that requires very careful documentation." As he headed upstairs, I had the distinct feeling that I'd just walked into a trap that had been months in the making, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I wondered if I'd finally pushed Deacon too far. What was he planning with all those papers? The text from Owen came on a Thursday morning, while I was getting ready for work. "Group dinner tonight at the bistro, celebrating Jake's birthday. You in?" I should have said no. After the hotel incident 3 weeks ago, I'd been trying to pull back, to create some distance while I figured out what I wanted. Deacon had been watching me with those careful eyes, and Nora had started asking why Mommy and Daddy were so quiet lately. But Owen's text made my pulse quicken the way it always did, and I found myself typing back, "Wouldn't miss it." The dinner was supposed to be casual, just the usual gym crowd celebrating Jake's 28th birthday. But the moment I walked into the bistro, I could tell something was different. The energy was charged, electric, like everyone was in on a joke I hadn't heard yet. "Lysandra," Sarah called out, waving me over to their usual table in the back. "We saved you a seat." The seat was, predictably, right next to Owen, who stood to greet me with a hug that lasted just a beat too long. "You look incredible," he murmured in my ear, his breath warm against my neck. I'd dressed carefully, a black wrap top that showed just enough cleavage to be interesting, dark jeans that hugged my curves, heels that made my legs look endless. I'd told myself I was just making an effort for a friend's birthday, but we all knew better. "Thanks," I said, sliding into the chair beside him. "Sorry I'm late. Work was crazy." "It always is," Jake said with a knowing grin. "Good thing you have such flexible hours." There was something in his tone that made me look around the table more carefully. Everyone was smiling, but there was an undercurrent I couldn't quite identify. "Where's Deacon tonight?" Sarah asked innocently. "Doesn't he usually join us for celebrations?" "He had papers to grade," I said automatically. "You know how teachers are." "So dedicated," Owen said, his hand finding mine under the table. "Some people are just different priorities." The conversation flowed around me, gossip about other gym members, complaints about work, plans for the weekend, but I was hyper-aware of Owen's proximity, the way his thigh pressed against mine, the casual intimacy of his touch. "You two are so cute together," Janet observed, appearing at our table with a drink in hand. I hadn't even realized she was coming tonight. "What do you mean?" I asked, though my heart was already racing. "Just the way you look at each other, like you're sharing some delicious secret." The table went quiet for a moment, and I felt heat rise in my cheeks. "We're just friends." "Of course you are," Jake said, raising his beer in a mock toast. "To friendship." "To very close friendship," Sarah added with a giggle. I should have left then, should have made an excuse about getting home to Nora, about having an early morning, about anything that would have gotten me out of that restaurant and away from the increasingly dangerous energy at our table. Instead, I ordered another glass of wine and leaned into the attention, into the thrill of being seen as desirable and interesting and worth pursuing. "You know what we should do?" Owen said, his arm sliding around the back of my chair. "We should go dancing after this. There's that new place downtown." "Lysandra." The voice cut through the restaurant chatter like a knife. I turned, and there was Deacon, standing beside our table in his teacher clothes, khakis and a button-down shirt that suddenly seemed painfully ordinary next to Owen's fitted black t-shirt. "Deacon!" I jumped up so quickly I nearly knocked over my wine glass. "What are you doing here?" "I thought I'd surprise you," he said, his eyes taking in the scene. Owen's arm still draped possessively around my empty chair, the intimate way our group was clustered together, the guilty flush I could feel burning across my face. "That's so sweet," Sarah said, though her tone suggested she found it anything but. "Deacon, right? We met before." "We did." Deacon's voice was perfectly polite, but there was something underneath it that made me nervous. "Jake, happy birthday." "Thanks, man. You want to join us?" "We were just talking about how great Lysandra looks tonight." I wanted to disappear into the floor. Deacon's eyes found mine, and I saw something there I'd never seen before. Not just hurt, but a kind of cold calculation that made my stomach drop. "She does look beautiful," Deacon said. "She always does. Though I have to say I'm surprised to see her here." "Why?" Owen asked, standing up to his full height. He had at least 3 inches on Deacon, and the difference had never seemed more pronounced. "Because she told me she was working late tonight. Something about a big case that required her immediate attention." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel everyone at the table watching, waiting to see how this would play out. Someone at a nearby table had their phone out, clearly recording. The case wrapped up early," I stammered. "I thought I mentioned I might meet up with everyone afterward." "No," Deacon said quietly. "You didn't mention that." "Well, surprise." I forced a laugh that sounded brittle even to my own ears. Sometimes plans change. They certainly do. Deacon looked around the table, his gaze lingering on each face before returning to mine. "Lysandra, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" "Actually," Owen interjected, "we were just about to order dessert. Maybe you could wait." "I wasn't talking to you," Deacon said, and something in his tone made Owen take a step back. The entire restaurant seemed to be watching now. I could see phones being raised, could practically feel the gossip spreading like wildfire through the social media networks that connected everyone in our small suburban community. "Deacon, you're embarrassing me," I hissed. "Am I?" He looked genuinely curious. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been doing a pretty good job of that yourself." "What's that supposed to mean?" Instead of answering, Deacon pulled out his phone and held it up so everyone at the table could see the screen. It was a photo, Owen and me leaving the hotel 3 weeks ago, his arm around my waist, my face turned up toward his, with an expression of unmistakable intimacy. The world tilted sideways. "Where did you get that? Does it matter?" Deacon's voice was still calm, still controlled, but I could see the pain underneath the composure. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Owen had gone very quiet beside me. Jake was staring at his beer like it held the answers to the universe. Sarah looked like she was watching the most entertaining movie of her life. "Deacon, I can explain." "Can you?" He put the phone away and looked at me with eyes that seemed to see straight through to my soul. "Because I'd really love to hear how you explain this. How you explain the lies, the secret meetings, the way you moved me out of my seat at Rebecca's wedding so he could sit next to you. How you explain using our joint credit card to pay for hotel rooms while I was at home helping our daughter with her homework." The words hit me like physical blows. Everything I'd thought was secret, everything I'd convinced myself was harmless, laid out in stark detail for everyone to hear. "You've been spying on me," I said weakly. "I've been trying to save my marriage," Deacon replied. "But I think we're past that now, don't you?" He turned to Owen, who was looking increasingly uncomfortable. "And you, I want you to stay away from my wife, permanently." "Look, man," Owen said, holding up his hands, "I never meant for things to get so complicated. But they did, and now you're going to uncomplicate them by disappearing from our lives completely. Are we clear?" Owen glanced at me, and I saw something in his expression that made my heart sink. This wasn't the passionate lover who'd promised me I deserved better. This was a guy who'd been caught in an uncomfortable situation and wanted out as quickly as possible. "Yeah," he said quietly. "We're clear." Deacon nodded once, then looked back at me. "I'll be at home when you're ready to have an honest conversation about our future. If you're ever ready." He walked away, leaving me standing in the middle of the bistro, with a table full of people who were no longer looking at me with admiration, but with a mixture of pity and fascination that made me want to crawl under the floor. "Well," Jake said finally, "that was intense." My phone was already buzzing with notifications. The video was spreading, people were tagging me, my carefully constructed double life was unraveling in real time across every social media platform I'd ever joined. Owen sat back down and wouldn't meet my eyes. "Maybe I should go," he said. "Owen, wait." But he was already gathering his jacket, already backing away from the mess we'd created together. "I'll call you," he said, but we both knew he wouldn't. As I stood there, surrounded by the wreckage of my reputation and my marriage, I realized that Deacon had just played a game I didn't even know we were playing. And he'd won. The video went viral overnight. I woke up to 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, and a notification that I'd been tagged in a post that had been shared over 200 times. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Deacon confronting me at the bistro, the photo on his phone, Owen's hasty retreat, my face cycling through shock, anger, and something that looked uncomfortably like guilt. The comments were brutal. "OMG, is this the insurance lady from Maple Street? I always thought there was something off about her. Poor husband, he seems so nice. What a piece of work. Feel bad for their kid." I called in sick to work, claiming food poisoning, but Janet texted me an hour later. "Boss wants to see you first thing Monday." The video made it to the office group chat. My professional reputation, built over 12 years of careful networking and competent work, was crumbling as fast as my personal one. Deacon had left early, before I was awake, but there was a note on the kitchen counter, written in his careful teacher's handwriting. "Gone to my mother's with Nora for the weekend. We need space to think. The papers on my desk might interest you." I found the papers spread across his home office, like evidence in a courtroom. Bank statements with charges highlighted in yellow. Phone records showing the frequency of my calls and texts to Owen's number. Printouts of my work computer login times that didn't match the overtime I'd been claiming. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, a detailed timeline of my lies going back 6 months. At the bottom of the stack was a business card, Davidson & Associates Family Law. My hands shook as I called the number. "I'd like to speak with someone about divorce proceedings," I said when the receptionist answered. "Are you currently represented by counsel?" "No, but I think my husband might be." "Name?" "Deacon Harker." There was a pause, typing, then, "We can't represent you. Conflict of interest." The call died, and the plan behind Deacon's calm finally clicked. Mom arrived, already seeing the Facebook mess, and I collapsed into her arms. I told my story like a plea for mercy, but even she couldn't hide the doubt in her eyes, especially when Nora came up. Monday, Patricia pulled up spreadsheets. Overtime I never worked, sick days for hotel meetings, theft in neat rows. I was escorted out with a box. I called Owen. He said it was too complicated and hung up. Then the divorce